Ladies and gentlemen, wish you all a great morning to begin with. The security of homes, home pages, and homeland security is driving home the importance and relevance of the theme of this conference. Every citizen is a stakeholder as well as a consumer of security. And today we are living in a time when we have guided missiles, but misguided men, as said by John F. Kennedy many years ago, but still relevant, with increasing significance. In the aftermath of the Mumbai terror attacks, there was a spate of discussions, as it always happens. After the horse has bolted, the stable door is sought to be closed. And now it is a time to introspect and reflect. Where do we stand vis-à-vis the threats? Have the threats come down? Has our preparedness increased? For the last many years, I have been crusading in this state with the concept of the Friends of Police, a platform for concerned and involved stakeholders, which is based on the assumption that every individual, not just in India but across the globe, is a stakeholder in security and can contribute to buttressing security. The Friends of Police concept was born out of my own experience, where I survived with severe injuries the world's first human bomb that killed the former Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi in Sri Perambudur. After that incident, when I found a young, untrained, poor citizen coming to my aid in the jeep that carried me bleeding to the nearby primary hospital, I realized that the untrained citizen with a commitment to security can play even greater role than sometimes even trained policemen. And this led me to conceptualize the concept of Factor X. The entire security architecture, as rightly mentioned by the chairman of this session, Mr. Ranganath, ideology comes before security. The battle is first won or lost in the mind. And there is a need to focus first on prevention strategies rather than detection or punitive strategies. Prevention strategies rely largely on concepts, psychological concepts. And one of the psychological concepts that I wrote about early after my traumatic experience was a concept called Factor X, which is been published in various journals across the world and is available on the internet under the title An Innovative Concept to Sensitize Security Personnel, Factor X. The implication of the concept of Factor X is that every human being on the planet needs to adopt a proactive thought process. You do not wait till the horse has bolted before you take steps to strengthen the stable door. You assume that something is present rather than may or may not happen. And therefore, when you start with such an assumption, automatically your security consciousness is heightened, your sensitivity is heightened, and that leads to preemption of various threats. So we need to work with concepts which are cost-effective, which can spread virally. And that is why I request the CII to look at my concept of Friends of Police and Factor X. Factor X has implications even for the corporate world. Every corporate, large corporate, can have an X cell which merely examines a body of trained people, a small nucleus, which will keep looking at the possible threats to the employees or to that organization from different quarters. And that in turn would lead to finding appropriate technologies. Security should not be measured in terms of the quantum of expenditure, because very often our quarries, those who pose the threat, adopt very cost-effective strategies which are within their means. Sometimes it does not involve expenditure at all. It could be using the very strength of the enemy against themselves. That's why I say that the greatest instance of lateral thinking is the 9/11 attack, where the terrorists used the aircraft of the victim country, their pilots, their fuel, in order to attack the targets. So sometimes it wouldn't involve much expenditure. So security is not about throwing a cannonball at a fly, but an appropriate attack. Preemptive strategy. An amphibious multi-factor X attack such as the one that occurred in Mumbai is not a mere act of terrorism, but asymmetric warfare requiring not just preparation of the police or its anti-terrorist component, but the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, as well as the paramilitary, the fire service, private security agencies, and the wider public. A constant visualization by all these agencies of possible future asymmetric warfare scenarios is the first step in such preparation to be forewarned as to be forearmed. The front lines of warfare, as well as threats to security, are no longer national boundaries, but it could emerge within the comforts of our homes. It could be crowd centers and symbols of prestige, power, affluence, and national security lying deep within our domestic territory. It calls for a reorientation of the deployment of the defense and security forces of the country such that the crack units of the Army, Navy, Air Force, police, paramilitary are not just deployed to guard the borders, but also all such installations. It also involves the concept that each to his own. Every individual citizen should be sensitized so that he takes appropriate measures. Today, virtually every citizen in this country has either a mobile phone or access to a mobile phone. And this mobile phone could be a platform by which you can create a remote, networked, wireless monitoring of security. Sitting in these rooms, we should be able to access the front portals of our homes to know what is happening there, and to be able to issue electronic commands so that you will be able to protect our own homes. Because the persons who post such threats are becoming more and more innovative. And as Bernard Shaw said, it is the criminal, the terrorist, who is the artist. The policeman or the security personnel is only the critic who comes into the picture after his handiwork is exposed. And therefore, we who have a stake in security need to be proactive. The surprise element is all about extending the front line deeper and on a more spectacular scale than has ever happened before. After the idea of Friends of Police won the prestigious £15,000 Her Majesty the Queen's Award for Innovation in Police Training and Development in 2002 in Commonwealth-wide competition, as many as 100,000 FOP volunteers, very ordinary people, the VOPs, and an equal number of police personnel from constable to higher ranks have been trained over the last 12 years. The faculty of the FOP media sensitize the policemen to work in unison, in tandem with the very ordinary people, the FOPs. And they are trained in the attitude, skills, and knowledge of community policing. To adopt the philosophy of community policing is one of the ways to sensitize the entire population. If the concept of FOP is adopted nationally, as I have been striving over many years, it would spread virally, and I, for one, am absolutely sure that it would diffuse even the ideological ammunition that captures the imagination of the youth in large parts of the country. The very intent would not exist, and therefore you need not even escalate to the next level of finding appropriate technology. So training, as they say in the defense forces, if we train in peacetime, we'll bleed less in wartime. So the practical fallout of such training is manifest in cases being detected, intelligence being shared, in conflict resolution across the state, law and order problems being resolved or contained or preempted. So FOP is a hearts and mind strategy and not a mere eyes and ears one. It also leads to more enlightened and active citizenry. In the struggle against security threats, the role of technology, however, cannot be underestimated. Next only to human intelligence and human strategies, the adoption of the latest and appropriate surveillance technologies is extremely vital. In the wake of increasing threats within and across the borders, it is imperative that reliance on indigenous appropriate technologies, innovations, as well as imported technologies happens on a greater scale. And this is the challenge to the industry, to support such research and development. The acquisition of technology being extremely capital intensive on the one hand and subject to rapid obsolescence on the other, a holistic view should be taken of the specific surveillance and security needs of various sectors of a national entity, identify common solutions, match needs with available technologies, adopt necessary training programs in hardware, software, and otherware, integrate data collection, responsive action, and take up periodic review. In fact, the concept of FOP has implications even for computer-related security. You can have an EFOP network of all software personnel collaborating in this task of preempting cyber attacks, cyber crimes, cyber terrorism, and so on. As I was attending a lecture at the London School of Economics many years ago, the head of the computer security wing said that the future, he said, the greatest threats would be not in the street, but it would be online. And this is happening 15 years later. Online, they could disable the systems of many of our hardware, even avionics or power systems across nations. The disappearance of the MH370, intriguing as it is an alarm call for the world to wake up, that even the most advanced technology can be thwarted by a mere application of human ingenuity. The scope for research and development is immense, and the resources within the country and abroad should be tapped to the optimal level. Projects as modules could be delegated or awarded through a competitive process to academic or research organizations. So there is a need to give a boost to the R&D effort with regard to finding advanced technologies to bolster security. Security does not involve just, as I mentioned, surveillance. It could involve the keeping alive communication systems when there is X kind of situation. An X situation means a grave provocative situation like the Mumbai attack, when our reliance on normal communication systems would be found to be inadequate, as mobile phones would be jammed, and therefore there would be a need to create alternative systems which will work in such situations. The security needs of various sectors such as armed forces, railways, the police, ports, airports, the IT sector, banking, hospitality, healthcare, educational institutions, and not to forget the very ordinary people of India, all have their own nuanced categories and characteristics. While it is necessary to induct the latest technological measures, what is more important is the capability of the organization to look at technology hardware, such as surveillance cameras, biometric and biocryptic devices, automated access control devices, RFID hardware for transportation and visitor management as part of a holistic system which would include policies, procedures, training, drills, archival measures, retrieval and analysis of surveillance graphs. So even a photograph of a mob should lead to an ability to be able to identify the individuals in that mob who had either caused harm or has a potential to cause harm. Such technologies are now available in the globe. As I mentioned, security consciousness among the general public needs to be greatly heightened with such concepts like the factor X, which can be easily understood even by a school student as well as by a professional security personnel. So special and immediate attention needs to be given for regulation, training and deployment of private security organizations. The private security industry of India is a burgeoning industry. We have more personnel in the private security than the entire armed forces, the police and the paramilitary put together. And it's increasing year by year to the extent of 10%. But unfortunately, these personnel are ill-trained and ill-equipped. In a global security conference a few years ago, I entered into a tie-up on behalf of FOP, to empower all these private security personnel as friends of police. This is another initiative that the CII can lend support and sponsorship so that we would organize training, because we have already had experience of training 100,000 friends of police and police personnel over the last 12 years. So information dissemination on the types of threats faced could improve civil vigilance, and regular brainstorming sessions like this to improve surveillance methods can increase civilian involvement to secure our country and even beyond our country's borders. Because this is a time not just to think in terms of national security, but we need to think globally and act locally. There are lessons for India to draw from the MH370. How do we prevent such an incident here? How would we react to such an incident here? So there is a need for intensive brainstorming on such issues. So there is a need to network across segments, across all the personnel who are directly involved in security, whether in the defense, or the police, the paramilitary, or in industry, or in various other security-related or technological sectors. To achieve better networking between these organizations, a pan-Indian network on an ongoing basis could be thought of to exchange ideas and enhance closer collaboration between various stakeholders is needed. I'm sure that this conference will lead to certain concrete steps in terms of resolutions at the end of the day, which will take India forward and take the world forward in terms of security preparedness. Thank you.